Horror is single-handedly the most difficult genre to perfect, and even good horror movies don't always get the credit that they deserve.
I go to see most movies.
John Carpenter, who worked on The Fog and Halloween, explained that when asked about creating an atmosphere for horror, that there's a specific secret. It should be scary. It sounds obvious, but comedy films must be funny. Romance movies must be romantic. Adventure films need adventure, but there's a different expectation to all of these in comparison to horror. When I watch a comedy film, I very rarely laugh out loud. When I watch a romance, I've never once said "ah" out loud. But with a horror movie, if I don't feel truly frightened, jump, or get paranoid, I sometimes feel let down, as if I've just wasted my time that I might never get back, and I feel frustrated. This level of disappointment we don't feel with other genres though. There are countless comedy films being released that repeat the same style of jokes that we've seen before. However, this does make people entertained, and it gives them an escape that they desire when putting the film on. With horror, unless you're truly scared from an intense build-up, suspense throughout, and then finally the jump scare, then we tend to feel more let down by the film for not delivering what we paid to see. But this objective isn't as easy to achieve within the horror genre. During the mid to late 2000s, the movie Paranormal Activity was released. Paranormal Activity focused heavily on jump scares, and to its credit, with a tiny budget, it did make a lot of mainstream film watchers scared. Now personally at FU Review, we weren't the biggest fans, but it brought a lot of the mainstream film watchers into the horror genre. FYI, I thought that the newest Paranormal Activity was completely different to the others, and I believe that it's definitely moving in the right direction. But now, back to the video. During this time, there was a huge push on low-budget horror movies, with less focus towards storyline or story twists, but more focus on the jump scares. Now don't get me wrong, there are a lot of horror gems that came from this period, but the audience soon made it clear that unless a jump scare is worthy and appropriate, then it's just not needed in adding fear to the film. When we compare the first Paranormal Activity to horror films like Hereditary, Come and See Me, or Martyrs, we know that collectively the last three films I mentioned don't hold anywhere near as much jump scares as the first, but the storytelling, script, and visual aesthetics are what make these films such great horror movies. Hereditary uses psychological trauma to add tension and build up fear. Come and See shows the cruelty of human beings during one of the most upsetting times in history, and uses this sadistic nature of a real-life event to bring fear to the viewer. Martyrs uses a mix of psychological and physical torment to explain its twisted story, in which you slowly learn more and more of what the protagonist is going through. The genre of horror is so large that, depending on who you ask, you'll almost always get a different answer to the question of what is the best horror film. If you ask two people what their favourite comedy films are, they'll probably be able to appreciate each other's opinions. But horror is a whole new universe within itself, with many, many different opinions and favourites. There are those that love the earlier horror films, such as Psycho or The Exorcist, that only enjoy horror movies pre-1990s. Additionally, you could only enjoy zombie horror films such as Resident Evil or Dawn of the Dead, or psychological horrors with no jump scares at all, compared to the paranormal type subgenres with many jump scares. Additionally, you have the serial kill horror movies or the science fiction genre, like Annihilation or Event Horizon, not to mention the many subcategories within these genres. When you look at the reviews of horror movies, it's almost impossible to create the perfect horror film according to critics. The variables are so large, and additionally the person's knowledge of horror has an impact on their review too. For instance, if there is no jump scares, then a more casual horror fan might not realise that the horror community is sick of cheap jump scares, and that maybe the director couldn't find an appropriate time for a jump scare in order to do the film any justice. If there are too many, then this has the risk of weakening the plot, making the viewer less scared as they begin to expect one round every corner.
This is Sparta!
I enjoy watching most genres, but horror is the one that I enjoy the most. And the truth is that my favourite horror movie is probably different to yours, which is most likely different to the next person's. I think that the easiest solution to all of this, that covers all areas vaguely enough to be accurate but specific enough to not have to explain in every single detail, is that, with horror, there is a very specific secret. It should be scary. I guess John Carpenter had it right all along.